Hi, everybody. This is Jason Haas. Welcome to the Tablas Creek Weekly Instagram Live broadcast. I am incredibly excited for the guest that we have joining me today. We have Elizabeth Schneider from Wine for Normal People, book and podcast. And while everybody is joining, I want to take you, as usual, on a little tour of what we have going on here at Tablas at the moment. So I'm going to pull up some photos. I thought it would be fun. I haven't done this in a little while. I want to take you on a little tour of the original dry farmed vineyard block that we call Scruffy Hill. We call it Scruffy Hill because it's on the far side of Las Tablas Creek. We still don't have a well over there. And so there was a long stretch where we didn't plant it well. We tried to figure out what to do with it. Now it has about 15-year-old dry farmed mix of Mourvedre and Grenache and Syrah. There's a little bit of Counoise and a tiny little bit of Roussanne over there. But I wanted to show you how that looks, because I have been showing you mostly photos from our trellised blocks. So this is looking up the big hill from the Mourvedre section up to the Grenache section up at the top of the hill. I want to show you a close-up of one of those Grenache vines. You can see that it is basically, it's unsupported. It's just growing by itself. It's very wide-spaced, and that allows these dry-farmed vines to have enough room to get the resources that they need from the soil. The Grenache is just starting to flower. It smells really good up there. You can't see a lot with the Grenache flowering, but it smells great. You can see the soil super clearly there. It's a hilltop, so there's not a lot of topsoil. So you can see all that crumbled, flaky limestone that there is underlying everything at Tablas Creek, but it's close to the surface there. I'll give you a little more kind of expansive view down one of those hills. It's a little hard to tell how steep it is from this picture, but it's about a 30-degree slope. So it is challenging to farm. It is challenging to walk. I think I can get it. I took a few on angle that will show you just how steep that is, and hopefully a little bit of how far apart those vines are. Some of the other things that we are working on now at Tablas, we completed our red blending last week. Those of you who read the blog that I posted this week, it was about the blending. I can never remember being as excited about a vintage as I am about these 2019s. It was an outstanding vintage for all of Mourvedre and Grenache and Syrah. We've got new grapes like Vacarez and Senso that we've never had a chance to play with before. It's super exciting, and we're moving straight from that into bottling the 2019 whites in a couple of weeks. So when wandering through the cellar, a couple things that I thought were worth pointing out. Check it out, our first ever Bourbelanc, going into bottle again week after next. Things like the Côte Blanc, Grenache Blanc, a lot of our core white wines, and then a couple of reds that we hadn't gotten around to bottling yet, including our varietal Counoise. So super excited for all of that. This is big winemaking time of year. Generally late spring, early summer is when you put together the wines from one year and you bottle the wines from the previous year on the red side, and when you've gotten around to finishing the blending and bottling on the whites. Okay, that is enough of my introductory vineyard tour. So I mentioned at the very beginning, if you tuned in right when we started, that I am exceptionally excited for the guest that we have today. I've invited Elizabeth Schneider, who is the founder of the Wine for Normal People podcast, and who also has a relatively new book out. And I'm going to invite her to join us. And I just sent the request. So I'm looking forward to talking to her about the book, about the podcast, and generally, hey, Elizabeth.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
Oh, of course. Sort of fun to be on the opposite side of this exchange. You've had me on the podcast a couple of times to talk about what we're doing. So I feel like it's a cool chance for people maybe who don't know you or don't necessarily yet know about the podcast, or know the podcast but don't know the book, to hear a little bit about what you're doing.
Yeah. I mean, it is kind of weird because I always like to ask you. I mean, I still have, by the way, not mention Vermentino. I mean, come on. No, I mean, I love your wine so much and I love what you guys do. And I love that when I talked to you yesterday about the labeling podcast I did, which is like become this giant firebrand and everybody is like fighting about it on every channel that I have, that like you have a foot in Europe. So I love that. Like you're the only ones that have a full foot in Europe, meaning like you are fully partnered with somebody. So when I said to you yesterday, you can ask the parent family about what's going on with EU regulations because they're going to have to. I mean, that's so great. I love that. I love that about it. No, it just gives you a global view. It allows you to understand all the wine drinker, everybody who is a wine drinker. I think some people who are in California sometimes get so concentrated on California, but you understand there's a larger picture. And I love that. That's why I'm talking to you. You're also from, you're from this coast. You're from the
Right. So, so you're in North Carolina.
Yes.
But you're not originally from there. You're originally from New York.
Of course. Of course.
So, how did you get into wine in the first place?
It was slow and meandering. Well, first of all, and I know like there'll be some Jewish people that'll be like, what are you talking about? But like my family's Jewish. Jews don't really drink that much. I mean, honestly, now they do, like new Jews do, but old Jews, like it was Manischewitz and that's pretty much it. So my family did not drink that much. And then my dad, who is a university professor, started to get more into wine, and he was getting a little snotty with me and my sister who were living together in Boston. This was after we went to Wesleyan, right? So after that. And she was a lawyer and I was working for Forrester Research, which was a high-tech market research company. And we were like, we got to take a class. Like because we kept going to these tastings. Everybody assumed that you knew what you were talking about, these tastings. It's so I think this is it's gotten so much better. But you would walk into a store in Boston and be like, do you want to taste a wine? And you'd be like, sure. And then they'd be like, what do you think? And you had no idea what to say. You didn't know the lingo. And then everybody would dismiss you because you were young and because you didn't know the lingo. And it felt bad. And I felt stupid, and I wasn't really used to feeling stupid because, I was a hardworking nerd. So we took a class, and this guy, John Miller, I'll never forget him, Boston accent. I can't really do the Boston accent, but he had like a Boston accent. He was from a distributor. And he started bringing in all these wines, and got bitten by the bug. It was Alsace Trimbach Riesling. That was like, ow, that's wine? How could that be wine? And then, then things progressed. I got my MBA, and I actually worked in St. John as a waitress. Did you know that? You didn't know that.
No.
You know that? Yeah. So I took what I like to call my life sabbatical. I just sort of had this it was after 9/11, blah, blah, blah. I was like, job's not really great. Just got broken up with by my boyfriend. I'm done. So I literally I knew a kid that had done this. So I packed a bag and my computer, and I was like, I'm going to take the GMAT down there. Wrote my business school essays, worked as a waitress, learned so much because, the experience of working in on-premise, like you get so much experience. And it was at an Italian restaurant, so we did sell a lot of wine. And then I went to UNC, and then I was about to take a job. I literally had pills, cars, and wine. That was what I could do. I could do Tylenol, Toyota, or the big winery. And I went and worked for the big winery. So yeah, so that's how it all started.
And that was how you made your first trip to Tablas Creek, right? It was part of that big wineries education program.
Right. And it was crazy because, that was very nice of you guys to do, because most people would not accept those kinds of groups. Like there were only 2 or 3 places that we could actually go. It was like Chateau St. Jean, you guys, and Fest Parker. And that was it. So, yeah, so we went, and I was totally bowled over by what you guys were doing, because on that trip, I think they brought a lot of people to Tablas Creek, and it was like, most people they were just tasting, but you showed us, at that time you had the nursery. Mm-hmm. you weren't there, but someone showed us the grafting, and
Yeah.
it was more like, for me, it was really, really intense. And I was like, wow, this is like a whole other side. But, I had a limited amount of time. So I was excited when I was able to like come back and explore and then get to know you. And it's just, yeah, it's just the amount of education that you offer is so helpful, because it really, that's the other thing is, I am focused on educating people about wine in a way that makes them comfortable. You have the ability to show them. And I love, like, when you're showing them that the hill, showing everybody the hill and all the things that you do in the blog. I think it's a very interesting question. Like, what do you do when the year is so good? Is that a blessing or a curse? People don't think about that.
Yeah.
It's good.
No, it is. It's that was sort of the question on my blog, was like, is it easier or harder when you have a great vintage? And there's ways in which it's both.
Right. I would assume it's probably harder, because it's so good. I mean, and then, but that, that string, you can extrapolate that all the way through. So let's say, you have more freedom to blend, but let's say that you were in Burgundy. What do you do then? Right? Like, you push it all downhill, and then that goes to like my number one tip about Burgundy, which is, in a good year, buy the bottom from the best producers, right? Buy the Bourgogne from the top guys, because it's going to be so good. It'll be pushed down all the way.
Right. That's it's your only option. When you're working mono varietal, the only option you have is to declassify.
That's right. But I mean, that benefits us, because you declassify into village, and then we can actually afford that. But yeah, but you have more freedom for sure.
Yeah, it's a luxury, and also to be in a place where the chance of a really disastrous vintage is very low. I mean, the vintages have different characters. There's different things we want to show off with each one, but like there's been 1 year in the last 20 where we were like, we don't think it's good enough to make an Esprit de Beaucastel in that era, and that was a year where we had frost that scrambled everything up, and the Mourvedre wasn't great. So yeah, that happens, but it's rare.
Well, and I would assume that, I mean, given the blending, right, you've got, again, because you're not monovarietal, you have some choices to work with too. I mean, obviously, if your main grapes don't work, then you can't.
You got issues.
Yeah, but I think that idea of blending also is something that, I love the idea that the Central Coast is really the nexus. You guys are the nexus of this. That why are we so obsessed with monovarietal? It's good to see some more people doing blends, don't you think?
Yeah, and I think it's really changed in the last, like 5 to 7 years. You've gone from, like, you really feel sort of like an outcast if you're doing blending, to all of a sudden it's become much more of a thing that's not just this tiny little weird niche that connects to Europe. It's a much bigger piece of what goes on here.
It tastes good. It's an agricultural hedge in case something goes wrong. I mean, it all works.
My explanation is always, how often do you cook with just one ingredient? Like,
that's a very good question. And unless you're like on a massive diet, as I'm trying to go, do you know, so I have a business partner for underground wine events, and she called it the COVID-19, that the weight that you gain from the
like the freshman 15, this is the COVID-19. That's funny.
It was hilarious. So yeah, I guess if you're trying to get rid of the COVID-19, then yes, but otherwise.
So you started the podcast in 2011, is that right? Yep. So that was at the very leading edge of podcasts. How did you come up with the idea of doing it, and what was it like podcasting in a time when that was such a new thing?
So it was not my idea. I am not super technology person. It was this guy, Rick Breslin, who had, I think he still has the app Hello Vino. It was very popular for a while. Do you remember that app? It was like food pairing. I did some consulting work, writing work for the app, and he was a friend, and he's just a super positive, very nice guy. He's more of a technology guy, and wound up in wine. And he was like, I was telling him I had just quit the Big Hulking Winery. I was living on the East Coast, and it's hard to do wine stuff on the East Coast. And I was like, I really would like to get this message of normal wine stuff out, right? And he was like, why don't you start a podcast? I was like, what are you talking, what? What? And he was like, well, just do it. I'll send you a microphone and we'll just record and I'll edit it and we'll get it up. And it was like, okay. So we started doing it. And then there were early adopters at the time, because I think podcasts started in like '08 or something like that. I don't know. But so there were some people that were listening, and the audience just kept growing and growing and growing. And so then he got too busy to do it. And then I was like, said to my husband, you have a good voice and you're funny, so you're coming on. And so then we just started doing it, and then I never stopped, and it just kept growing. And at the beginning, it was, yeah, I mean, the audience it was crazy. I mean, it was still a decent amount of people that were listening to this thing. And then after Serial, you know,
right.
that blew podcasting up. And it's just so funny because I was telling you this yesterday. So the podcast, I was like a few years ahead on the podcast, and my dad kept being like, you ever gonna make money off of this thing? So it sounds like you're just doing like a free service. It's not like, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, all right, well, yeah, I don't know. I really don't know. And then I started the online classes because my listeners, who always have been, still are the best listeners in the entire world. You know some of them because they come to Tablas Creek. They are the best people in wine by far, so loyal, listen all the time, never leave me. I love you if you're listening. So if you're watching this. And they were like, please teach us classes. And I was like, how am I going to do that? So then I was like, okay, I guess I could do it on Google Hangout. So I did, because Zoom was nothing then. That was 6 years ago. So now look, now I'm very busy.
You get to see everybody else trying to frantically play catch up. It's like, wait, how do we do this online connection, online education and wine thing? Is it horrifying to watch? Is it inspiring to watch? Is it some combination?
A little combination of both, right? So I think there are some people who do it well once, but then try to keep doing the same thing over and over again. And I think, like, it's like podcasting. I always say this, like, here's the big problem, right? Is that if you would not have had a radio show before podcast, just because you can like set this up for $30 a month or whatever it is, does not mean you should, right? Because you still have to have the kind of, and I don't think I have necessarily a radio voice, but you have to have some sort of entertaining something to do that. And I always did theater stuff, and you know, like I've always been that person. So there's that. It's the same thing with education, right? If you can't get up in front of people and do a big talk, it's not going to play. It'll play even worse on the screen. And so winemakers are fantastic at talking for short periods of time, but they're not always great about giving engaging things or reading the audience, which I think that's been part of the problem, right? Is that like, you got to read the audience. They don't like it, forget it.
No, super important. It sounds very much like my experience with starting the blog. I mean, I remember when we did that, we started it in 2006.
Wow.
And it was because Mark Perrin, I mean, again, the Perrins are super progressive in so many ways.
Yes.
And he had started a blog for Femi Perrin the year before. And he's like, you should do it. You write anyway. This will be a chance for you to do some writing, a chance to share your photography. And it's going to be great for your search engine rankings. Like, you should do it just because of that. And I'm like, okay, I guess I'll figure it out and try it. And it turned out to just connect with the kinds of things I want to spend time doing anyway. And to get to see things sort of, other people sort of jump on that bandwagon and then fall off little by little, and then other people come on. It's been an interesting kind of long-term experience in watching people try to adopt this new way of communicating, which works for some people, it doesn't work for everybody.
Well, but think about it this way also, right? You have this liberal arts background, so you're very used to writing. You were doing, I mean, weren't you a journalist for a while?
No.
Or you did the tech, but you've always written. And I think that liberal arts, like, I mean, you spent 4 years just writing. That's all we ever did in liberal arts, right? We basically went to very similar schools. And it's like, you know, when you do that, you are very accustomed to expressing thoughts and arguments and laying things out and doing all that kind of stuff. And basically you write a mini essay every single time on a topic, every time you write. And I am doing similar stuff on the podcast. After I wrote the book, I could not write anymore. But but the blogosphere was the same thing as podcasting, right? If you're not a natural writer or you're not somebody who enjoys it, it's not something you're going to be able to do long term. But there's some people that are so good at it. You really are, because I think you take topics and you flesh them out, which I feel like some people just, they spend, like they do it for the search engine rankings, which you don't do, although it works in that way too, which is good.
Yeah. So that's probably a good segue into talking about the book. Like, how long had you been thinking about doing a book before you actually started?
Like 10 minutes. No, I'm just kidding. So my literary agent, she's a New Yorker also. She sent me a note and she said, "Hi, I listen to your show, and every time that I listen to your show, my boyfriend says, 'Who are you talking to? Like, why do you have somebody on speakerphone?'" And she's like, "I really would like you to write a book. I think that all of the things that you talk about and your approach could be really great in a book for people, like as a tool. Would you consider doing it? I would like you to do this." And so at first I was really suspicious because I knew nothing about the book process. I was like, who is this? I didn't realize how difficult it is to get a literary agent. Like, it's impossible, especially from like a great agency. And I was like, "So what is this? What is this? I don't understand." And she was like, "Look, I'm here for you. My incentives align with you, or I want to help you." So I did it. I had already sort of started mapping out what I wanted to do before she called. And then once she called, I was like, okay, well, I think I want to write sort of this reimagined primer that is basically me talking in the book. And it took a long time. It took like a really, really long time to write the book because I had 2 babies while I was writing it. But also the tone had to be right. So sometimes, especially because, you have young ones, well, they're not young anymore, but you have kids. So it's like when you have kids, you get drained, your emotional energy can go away very quickly. And so if you're trying to be creative and you need it can't happen every day. So I couldn't write every day. So I wrote when I felt inspired, when I felt like I was in the mood, I was in the groove, I could have the voice of the book, and then it came together. I mean, we cut a lot out. We cut a lot out of the book. It was like 180,000 words. We got it down to 140, so.
And it's 345 pages, so I can only imagine. And I love that you talked about the requirement of the voice that you need in order to write. Because one of the things that I loved about the book is that I could hear everything that you had written in your voice.
I know, it's pretty sad, but it's true. So what I always wonder is, like, if somebody picks up the book and they've never heard the show before, are they like, "Oh, I want to hear the person now," or are they like, "What the hell is this? I can't tell." You know what I mean? Like, I think that it's a very different wine book, though. You know that. I mean, it's probably, I can't think of anything else that's out there just because it's so emblematic of my personality.
Yeah, though it's interesting. When I was reading it, there's for me, it's sort of divided into 3 sections. There's like the introductory section, then there's the big reference section in the middle, and then there's the kind of really the important lessons to take home at the end.
That's right.
And I honestly, I'm not sure that I was expecting that reference section in the middle, which is something that I'm going to go back to and refer to. In addition, I was expecting the parts that were like really relatable and conversational and great ways of thinking about how I approach wine, how I order wine, how I talk about wine. But there's serious study in this too.
Yes. Well, I mean, every podcast that I do extensive. Again, this goes back to like the dorkery that is my personality and like the research background. I feel like that I went to Wesleyan University. I was a government major. I didn't study anything, and everything that I feel like I learned in my education was about making sure you back up everything that you have with excellent research, data sources, and making sure that everything is as accurate as you possibly can get it. And then I had to layer on the personality, right? So the thing for me is like in the podcast, and this is why people I think like them, is because they are fun, but I do meticulous research because it is very important to me to have accuracy. And if they're not accurate, or, you know, if I do a podcast with you and I have not done my homework on, you know, some of the things, if I don't ask you at least one question that you were like, what, really? Okay, I haven't thought about that before, then I've done something wrong. Most of the time I ask more than that. You know, I'm trying to get into that because I think and again, I don't mean to be like an education snob. I'm just explaining where my orientation, and I think that it all has to be backed up, and it can't just be I read Jancis Robinson and that's enough. It's got to be I read Jancis Robinson, I read Oz Clarke, I read the site from Von Rohn, I read Jason's thing on Movedra. All of that. As many sources as possible have to come together. You know, I've got a shelf full of books, but I also look online for more updated information. I'm constantly researching. I would say, you know, most of my job is researching. So when you write a wine book, like if you're going to do this, it has to be meticulously researched. Incidentally, you know, in the food and wine pairing chapter, I took exercises from a food scientist at at Virginia Tech, because I went that deep. And for podcasts, I do that all the time. I will go into that Google academic section, you know, the scholars, Google Scholar. I'll read all those things. I'll read tons of stuff. Because if I am not up on it, it's not that I can't present it. Like, who wants to do that, you know? So yeah, I'm a nerd.
Awesome. Cool. In the best possible way.
Nick.
So we got some great questions from some of our regular followers for you. So I'm gonna toss a couple of their questions at you.
Good.
So one of them I thought was great says, what advice do you have for young women who want to break into the wine industry?
It depends on where you want to go. So of course I mentor a ton of women, and men too, right? Like I'm not like a big feminist. I just want to help people I want more good people in the industry, right? More honest people in the industry. So I think that like the first thing that you need to do is figure out where you want to go, because the industry has a lot of different aspects to it. And so people are, I want to get into the wine industry. Well, it's very difficult. And I have to tell you, like I said at the beginning, no better experience than working in a wine shop, on premise, in a tasting room, going and carrying a bag, you know, if you've never done it before. Any of those experiences, you have to understand that, because I consider some of my most valuable insights, having worked in restaurants, being like a caterer, waiter, I was a bartender for catering, seeing how people interact with food and wine. It's incredibly important. And so just jumping in, there was a big contrast between me working at the big hulking winery and a lot of the other people I worked with, because we all came out of like business schools, but I was one of the, this was shocking me, I was one of the only people who had restaurant experience. Huh. And it served me well, because I was like, are you kidding? Like, do you have any idea what a server's life is like? Like, you're not talking about people who, you know, I was writing a server training program, and people were like, oh, they know everything. You know, they already know on premises. No, they don't. And it's hard, and they're trying to make money and make the rent. And, you know, it's like, but I think honestly, even if you're going to do like something else in addition to the wine stuff, do that. I mean, don't you think so, Jason?
I do. I mean, that's always the hardest thing, I think, is taking that first step for a lot of people. Yeah. And particularly if you come at it from if you go to school and study wine business, sure, fine. But most people don't do that. And they come from some sort of liberal arts background or some other career. And for me, the advice is always just get a toehold in a place that seems like a good place, a place that has good culture, a place that has a good organization. And see where that takes you, because it's that first step that's the hardest part.
Well, the small wine shops are a great place to learn. I mean, if you really want to learn about wine, you find a wine shop owner who knows a lot, and they will teach you and they'll bring you into their world. And that is huge.
Okay, cool. Next question. What are your top North Carolina wineries?
I don't have any.
Oh no.
I have a lot of Virginia wineries. I haven't been out exploring. I have had some North Carolina wines. I love that they're trying here. The climate's slightly different from Virginia. I don't think, for me, again, this is my opinion, and I'm not saying North Carolina should go to hell or anything like that. I love my state. I moved here very purposefully, but I don't love the wines here. I really do love the wines of Virginia. So again, just slightly different, higher mountains, higher elevation, that kind of stuff.
Okay. Do you think that these sorts of Zoom and webcasts that everyone has been having to do during this pandemic is going to result in a smarter, more curious wine consumer afterwards?
No, not at all.
How about smarter wineries afwards?
No, especially not that. So, okay. What I think is we have short memories, right? And when, knock wood and all the rest, everybody comes out of this healthy and we're good. I think we're going to go back to where we were before. I think people will be back to traveling. I think they're going to we're going to fall back into our habits. Will one or two places, namely like places like Tablas Creek, continue to do some of this stuff? Yes. Will people watch it? Sure, yes, but it won't be in the scale. I think wineries right now are holding their breath. We talked about this. Like they're just waiting for this to be over with so they can get back to business as usual. Is that a good strategy? I don't know. If it was working for them before, I guess so, but I don't think that this is going to result in a big sea change. I think some people, I will tell you that like for my business, I offer online classes and people have fun. I've been saying this on the podcast for years, take an online class, blah, 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 I've been selling, marketing myself. I think those people who have had the experience of doing it understand now that it can be a great experience, especially because you can be in your pajamas and take a class. But will they want to interact with a winery off? I mean, maybe a couple times a year. I don't think the way that it's been done. And no, wineries, I think consumers maybe might be a little bit more interested in seeking out this stuff, but I don't think wineries are going to do it. You know, honestly, a lot of wine, okay, here's a great story. A long time ago, I had somebody who was a TV producer and they were like, well, we should pitch a show. We should pitch a wine show. And I had this very honest girl say, you know what? You want to know the two shows that never make it and everybody knows they're poison? Wine shows and shows about horses. No one can make them work because wine is like, you got to be there. It's a tasting thing. You got to be there. You want to be there. You want to see the vineyard. You want to taste the wine with somebody who knows about it. You know, it's not enough to be remote.
Huh, cool. Awesome. Thanks. Okay. I promise we didn't plant this question. Question is, what's your favorite Tablas Creek wine to drink during quarantine?
Cote de Tablas, probably. Sorry, was that a bad answer?
No, I promise there's no bad answer. It's like asking, it's a little bit like me asking you, so which of my kids do you like best?
I know. It's really, I don't like when people ask me what my favorite wine is. I really don't like that because it does depend on your mood. Like right now it's the afternoon, so I took out the Vermentino. You know, there was in like maybe 2 shipments ago, was there a Tannat that was like a freaking barn burner, Jason? That thing was awesome. I mean, we see a little bit, it's not popular enough. It needs to be more popular, like, especially in the style you did it. That was a really freaking great wine. I mean, that was like, how do you soften that?
You grow it in Paso Robles?
Yeah, I mean, is that really what it is?
I'm convinced that most of the Tannat grown in France, most of the Tannat that I've tasted from Uruguay, which has not been super extensive, but the handful that I've tasted, they all taste like the tannins didn't quite get there.
Yeah.
It's a grape that's got so much tannin anyway that if it has just the littlest hint of greenness, it kind of tips it for me over the edge. Yeah,
I'm with you. Uruguay, I've had a few from Uruguay where it is warm enough to make it happen, but nothing, Madeira, it's not working. But yeah, that Tannat was amazing. You know, I always love your blended wines though, because it shows the best of everything all together. I think that, you know, And the Blanc is also really, I don't know, it's not quite warm. So we've had a really cool summer, and I'm a seasonal drinker. So I drink white in the summertime much more. But your whites you can drink in the wintertime. I just usually do save them. I'm not going to lie. I save them for summer.
I have some of our, for me, it's like there's some whites. I don't drink a lot of Roussan in the summer. I mean, that's for me is more of a wintry kind of thing. But
Yes.
by the same token, I don't drink a lot of Vermentino in the winter. I mean, that tastes like
Yeah. No, that's definitely a summer. I mean, I really think people do drink seasonally. I know there's been like research on it and stuff like that, but I think that people do drink seasonally, especially in warmer climates. I mean, if it's getting to be 100 degrees in the summertime, I do not want a red. I don't even want a refrigerated red. Like, I don't want red. I only want white. I want fresh, spritzy white. But yeah, no, but we're in this transitional season now. It's been kind of cold. So the Côte de Tablas fits that profile for me.
Awesome. Cool. Okay, so we're a little over the half hour that I had sort of aimed at. How do people, if they want to learn more about the book or about the podcast, what's the best place for them to go?
Well, the book is on Amazon, right? So Wine for Normal, and if you go back to Jason's tasting room, he was kind enough to carry it in the tasting room. So as that opens, you can get it. But the book, I should send you a bunch of book plates that you can put inside signed book plates. I'll do that.
Cool.
Sell signed copies, which are, they're rarity. Remind me of that. And I will definitely send you up. I'll send you a stack. So the book you can get on Amazon, you can get on Barnes and Noble, you can get from your local bookstore. It's available everywhere, and it's hard. I'm not sure how much longer, but it's hardback, but it's not that expensive. So whatever. It's a big, to Jason's point, it is a big reference book, couched in a fun read. And the podcast is on anywhere you get your podcast. You can go on my site at winefornormalpeople.com. The classes are on there too. Social media, like I'm on Wine for Normal People. I think, it's pretty standard, except Twitter. I'm at Normal Wine. That was Wine for Normal People did not fit in the handle.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking a little time out of your Wednesday to come and instead of being the question asker, being the question answerer.
Well, I feel like we just visited. I love it. It's good to see you.
It's the way that these things are supposed to work.
I know. Well, I wish I were there, and I will be there again. I know I was gonna come to Central California. I did a book tour in the southern part.
Yeah.
I was gonna come to Central California, Northern California to support the book. Very soon, though. Very soon. As soon as this is all over, I will come.
Awesome. I'll look forward to it.
Thank you, Jason, for having me. This is awesome.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And okay, thank you everybody who joined us this week. A couple of quick updates. Remember, we do these every Wednesday at noon Pacific. Neil is still doing virtual tastings on Fridays with a guest. Fridays at 5 p.m. Pacific. We're starting to do some more events with some wine shops around the country, wine shops, wine bars, restaurants. So if you look at the events section of our website, you'll find those. And we are hopeful that at some point in the next few weeks, we'll be able to reopen the tasting room. Obviously, there will be changes. We're going to be doing tastings outside instead of inside. Everything's going to be done by appointment. We have all of these new protocols in place so that when we do reopen, we'll be able to do it safely. But we're super looking forward to being able to welcome people back here, hopefully sooner than later. So again, thank you so much for joining us. I'll see you again next week. Stay safe out there.